Well, very good morning, everybody. See how long it is. Good morning. How's everybody this morning? Welcome back. Did you bring me anything? Oh. Could have brought me some sand or a fish or something. No? No.
National championship.
Hey, yeah. Go Gators. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Anyways. Well, let's talk about more important things, I guess. But hope everybody's doing fine this morning, and we are going to be getting into lesson 6, and we do have some books. We got some more books. So who needs a book? Joe? Need one right here. Is there anybody else need a book, a workbook? Are there any more back there, Joe? Does anybody else need one? All right, I think we're good, Joe. We're good. Need another. All right. Yeah, we're going to be getting into lesson 6 this morning. And talking about, as we continue the series of the challenges and trials of life, sometimes tragedies and things that happen, and how we push through, how we endure, how we overcome. We're going to talk some more about that this morning and some different things that we're going to look at. But let's see. And also just a reminder, we do have books, new books for the Wednesday class this week. So if you have not gotten a book, the new book for Wednesday, make sure to get one. Just come Wednesday night, we're going to actually finish out the last lesson of Deuteronomy. And then if we have time, which hopefully we will, we'll get started in lesson 1 in the book of Joshua. So make sure to come ready with that then. All right, well, before we get started in our lesson this morning, Devin, would you want to lead us in prayer? We'll ask Devin to lead us in prayer, and then we'll get into our lesson.
Pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning that you allowed us to have, for waking us up and allowing us another chance to serve you and to live for you, Father. We thank you for your love and your consistency, for your time and patience. Father, you've given us another day. And Father, I pray that we'll take advantage of this day, Father, by living faithfully unto you, glorifying your name in all that we say, do, and think, putting you first in all things, Father, for you deserve no less. You've done so much for us, Father, and I pray that we'll take this time during Bible class to really pay attention to what Brother Kevin is teaching us, that we'll take something from this lesson, and that we will remember that we're not alone in this life, and that when we're out in the mission field, we're going to face many trials, but we're not facing them alone. We have you. And with you, Father, we can accomplish everything. We can overcome anything and everything that comes our way, Father, because we know that in the end, you are victorious. So, Father, I pray that you'll be with us now and that we'll go about this class with the right heart and the right mindset, and that you'll continue to be with Brother Kevin, who we're so thankful for in the work that he's done here, and continue to encourage and uplift him as he continues working with us here at Zephyr Hills Church of Christ. And continue being with us. Bless us with the wisdom to understand your word, Father, so that we can better apply it to our lives, and bless us with the strength to overcome anything that the world tries to throw at us, Father. For we know that nothing in this world is worth eternal damnation, but serving you is worth coming home to you in heaven one day. Please be with us now. I pray this in Jesus Christ's precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So the title of our lesson this morning is a little intriguing, almost an oxymoron, really, because why is that? What's interesting about and important about and intriguing and an oxymoron about the title of this lesson?
How can God always be with us when we're suffering?
Okay, that may be part of it, yeah.
He's hurting while we're hurting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God is hurting while we're hurting. There's a key word in the title, and that word is sense. Do tragedies always make sense? No. So the idea of searching for sense in tragedy is kind of an oxymoron, because usually there is no sense to it. There is no sense to be found in the tragedy itself. Now, that's not to say there's nothing we can learn and gain from these things. We've already talked about that a lot. That's really the focus and the whole point of this series, is how to handle tragedies and trials and challenges. But it's not going to make sense. A lot of times it's not going to make sense. We're not going to know the why of everything, and that's really some important questions we've talked about. I'm going to talk about again in this lesson. Now, some of the why, there technically is a why to everything. That still doesn't mean it makes sense or that there's any sense to it. I've come up with, or at least there's 3 ways things happen. All right? There are 3 reasons things happen, 3 ways things happen in this life. And one is by our own choices, right? So sometimes things come about and things happen because of choices we've made. Would you agree? Yeah? So the reason and why is because, well, I decided to do such and such, to be somewhere. I decided whatever I decided, and then, some consequences or some things have happened based on my particular choices alone. And so sometimes that is the case. Sometimes, as he talks about in this lesson, especially in the beginning of this lesson, second reason things happen is just because of pure evil in the world. There is evil in the world. There is no sense to it. There is nothing, again, you're not going to find sense in it other than the fact that there's just plain evil in this world. And things happen because of people who are doing evil. And then finally, a third reason things happen is just by accident. There's such a thing as accidents. We call them, a lot of times, we call them freak accidents. There are things that just happen because time and chance. Time and chance happens to all men, book of Ecclesiastes. And so, a lot of things will fall into one of those categories. And I think those 3 categories, unless I've missed one, those 3 categories pretty much cover everything. By our choices, by the evil in this world or just simply by accident. And yes, there are some things that will and can happen, because of the will of God, that God will make certain things happen, but that's not our place to, pick and choose what, God is choosing to do. And we got to be careful. I think sometimes, and we've talked about this in this series already, sometimes we want to make sense of something, especially a tragedy, especially something that happens, but in our effort and attempt to make sense of something, I personally believe sometimes we can say the wrong things. We can come to the wrong conclusions. We can say things that really aren't exactly true. We can make assumptions about God, we can make assumptions about people, and we got to make sure that we don't do that either. There's not always sense, and that's the big thing, is we've asked the question throughout this, why? Why do these things happen? And we always want to know the why these things happen. The problem is there's not always a good answer. Again, sometimes it's by our own choices. Sometimes the answer is just because people are evil in this world at times. And sometimes things are just accidents. Things happen. And so, but if we are not content, here's the key. If we're not content with those answers, and we still want more answers, well, sadly, we're going to be disappointed. We're going to come up short. And that's where a lot of people struggle in their faith. That's where a lot of people who want to make sense of it but can't. And so they blame God, they get mad at God, they give up on God, and they quit. Because they're not satisfied with the answers of why these things happen. But again, he talks about in here, I forget if it's in the introduction or in the lesson, that basically, this kind of also, he really touches on the evil in this world in this lesson. And we know that's a big question. Why? Why is there evil in the world? Why do these things happen, And what's the answer to that? Why is there evil in the world?
There's always been evil in the world ever since
Sin, Satan, ever since the beginning of the world. Because, even at the heart of it, yes, Jose.
The Bible says that there was envy because he knows that it is destroyed by Jesus.
Yeah, the devil knows he's going to lose. He's trying to do everything he can before then to cause trouble and problems and cause God's people to give up. But ultimately, it's because God has given us what? Free will, right? We sometimes, if we're not careful, as we've talked about, we almost demand that, well, if I'm a Christian, a child of God, and I got faith in God, God's going to take care of me. He's not going to let anything bad happen to me. And we almost demand that of God if we're not careful. And then our faith really becomes conditioned upon that. Our faith can be conditional, that as long as God takes care of me and keeps me from anything bad happening, then I'll be faithful. I'll worship Him, I'll love Him, I'll serve Him. But if He lets such and such happen, well, then it's all off. But God has not made us mindless robots. God has not made us to where He's going to control every choice, everything that happens in our life. He has given mankind free will, free choice. And because of that, we know that there is sin in the world because of man's choice at the very beginning. Satan has been the tempter and encourager of those things. The way I always look at it, and it may be an oversimplification, but if you're going to blame anybody for the evil in this world, blame Satan. Don't blame God. The evil is certainly the work of Satan. It's what Satan promotes. It's what he encourages. It's what he wants. But God allows all men to make choices, which means that God is not going to stop people in the choices they make. Can God stop people from the choices they want to make? Sure, He can. Doesn't mean He's always going to, right? And so sometimes things happen, especially the evil that exists in the world. The Bible even talks quite a bit about the evil in this world and overcoming evil. You know, he throws in an example there of, 9/11. Did you have something, Jose?
Well, this is not from the beginning, because when God created Adam and Eve, that's the way everybody was suffer a lot, because they are they are the ones that first sinned against God.
Right? Yep.
And that's why we suffer a lot
Yeah.
in this world.
That's why we're in the situation we're in now, for sure. He talks about, for instance, 9/11, which really there are plenty of others. He lists some. I mean, there's so many examples we could use of evil things that have happened, or things that have tragedies, just sickening things that have happened simply because somebody chose to do evil. Somebody had it in their mind, somebody had it in their heart, and they did it. There is no rhyme or reason, there is no sense to it, except that there is evil in the world. That's the answer. But we got to make sure, as he says at the bottom of page 35, when he says, those who know of our faith often ask why, where is the sense in senseless tragedy? And sadly, some lose their faith because they cannot answer the question. And that's the challenge, is being content with the answers, but also having this hope we've already talked about, realizing this world is not our home. God has provided us with hope beyond this life that's full of evil, full of sickness, full of death, full of sadness and tragedy and all kinds of things. We're helpless without God. At the top of page 36, I like that little paragraph he gives. The problem is not that something bad happens to innocent people, because we see that daily. That's the other. We ask the question, well, why do bad things happen to people? Well, they just do. Because God has not promised to protect us from everything under the sun. God has not promised to keep everything bad from happening to us. That's always been a struggle. That was a struggle for Job and Job's three friends, wasn't it? He talks about Job in this lesson. That was something his friends couldn't understand. Job, eventually, he couldn't understand. If you read the whole book of Job, basically Job was demanding answers from God of why. How'd that work out for him? Not so good. God basically came and put him back in his place, and Job humbled himself. Then God blessed him. But and in others we could look at, there's not always going to be the answer of why. It just does. The problem is that things happen so randomly. A lot of times it happens to someone else. We often, that happens. So we never think it's going to be us. We never think we're going to be the one to suffer some kind of tragedy, until one day something happens, right? He goes on to say that if there is suffering in the world, and there is, we want a reason for it, we want predictability to it, we want to prepare for it, which technically we can prepare for tragedies by building up our what? Faith and hope and trust in God ahead of time. What appears to be random suffering may be the most terrifying. And so he gives an example even of that. But thus we are left with the emptiness of helplessness as we wrestle with what we do not understand or ever will. And so that brings us to this first part of a couple questions, the why. We ask why things happen. We expect some kind of order to this life. However, this life isn't built in a perfect system, in a perfect order. The things are going to be perfect all of the time. God has set in motion this world, the earth, and things to happen in a certain way, for things to happen, for there to be a cause and a reaction. So he gives a list of many examples there on the bottom of page 36, whether it's a family home that is destroyed by a neighbor while their neighbor's home is untouched, a middle-aged woman who eats right, exercises, and does all she can to fight off heart disease, but then she's diagnosed with cancer. A man takes his family on a long-awaited trip to the Rockies and gets in an accident and loses his mother, wife, and child, which he says was a true story he knew of. Everybody in these situations, many more, ask why. Why me? Why them? Why there? Why then? And it's not easy to answer. And sometimes there is no answer from our perspective, which is why the focus of this lesson, he gives the verse Hebrews 2:13. And there are plenty of other passages. It's about, we got to put what in God? Trust, faith. It's about trusting God and having faith, and having an unconditional, unwavering faith. That even when bad things happen, we will still be faithful to God, because our hope lies beyond this world, beyond this life. And so he talks about here, I was looking for a certain thing. I don't know where it's at. Anyways, but even, Proverbs 3:5, we will probably know by heart when it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Right? So we've got to lean on God's understanding. We've got to trust in God, and things are going to happen. And the key is to trust God when they happen. And also that second question on page 37, the what if. Should we dwell on the what ifs? What if, we look to the past and say, well, what if I hadn't have been there? Or what if I had done this? Or what if, fill in the blank. But does that change the past? Does it change what has happened? No. So we can't dwell on that. Also, looking ahead to the future in the what ifs. We may worry about the future. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Is that going to do us any good? No. Even in the present, if we worry about the present, is that going to do us any good? No. Now, not to say we can obviously try to make the best choices we can and try to take care of ourselves, take care of things. But at the end of the day, things happen. No matter how much we question, no matter how much we prepare, things just happen. Be it because of evil in this world or just by the time and chance and the accidents that take place. Or by our own choices and choosing. But we've got to live by faith. We've got to live and by trust in God and the hope that God has given us, that in spite of tragedies, he says, life is still worth living. And so he says, where was it? This is why some handle tragedy better than others. People of faith learn to live in hope. Hope that in spite of tragedies, life is still worth living. And as a result, we turn into the wind even in the face of unanswered questions. We place our trust in God and look for the future. Even it reminded me of Paul's words in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, when he was talking about death and those who have died. He says, I don't want you to sorrow and like others, like those of the world who have no what? Hope. Now, Paul's not saying that it's wrong for us to mourn and be sad when someone dies. But the way we handle those things is with hope, with faith in the future of what God has promised us. We get comfort, we get strength, we can look forward, we can still take joy in the hope of heaven. So regardless of the why, regardless of the what ifs, our hope and our trust and our faith is in God. Gary, did you have something?
I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think of Paul, probably one of the greatest servants of the Lord God that ever lived. And 2 Corinthians, I think, 12, where he was given a thorn.
Yeah. It's thorn in the
And
flesh.
couple that with the idea of Isaiah 55, 8, my thoughts, your thoughts.
Yeah.
As far as the heavens are above the earth, my thoughts are above the earth.
Right?
I guess what I'm saying is, we can't know everything.
No.
God knows what's good for our heart. Paul was given a thorn because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation,
Sure.
to prevent him from being boosted up in pride.
Yeah.
Who really knows what's inside one's own thoughts?
Sure.
Subconscious, things happen.
Yeah.
And I think trying to make sense out of the incomprehensible nature of the complexity of the world, it's kind of foolishness in a way.
Yeah.
You hit it right. Faith, forsaking all I take
Sure.
God.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
That's all I want to say. You know,
Yeah.
it's just, sometimes we think more of ourselves than we should.
Sure.
I know. I'm trying to get over that.
Yeah. And that's why we got to put our focus and trust in God, to seek Him first. Again, remember what this life is about. Remember our purpose. That if we're not careful, we can focus so much on this life that we try to have heaven on earth. But has God promised us heaven on earth? Nope, I haven't found that passage. But where has He promised us eternal life? In heaven with Him, right? So all the songs and His praises, this world is not my home, just passing through. We got to mean that. We got to mean that it is well with my soul, which, as a matter of fact, if I remember right, it is well with my soul was written by a man who basically lost everything. He lost his business, he lost his family, which sounds familiar to a biblical example. So many other things, putting our faith and our trust in God, even and especially through the hard times, and that's when we're going to be tested, as we talked about already in previous lessons. We can't change what happens. It's not that bad thing or whether bad things will happen, but when bad things happen and how we handle them, how we react to them. That's the key. And we've talked so much already in these lessons about how to learn and grow, to be challenged, to grow stronger, should grow stronger from these things. Should put our faith and our trust even more in God. Jose.
But everything that happens in the earth is not God. Purpose. The God don't want that everybody suffers. It's prophecy.
Sure.
It's prophecy because we're living in the last days.
Roser?
The prophecy of the Revelation is that everything will happen in the way soon. And we have to have faith in that and believe that God is not guilty.
Oh, we got definitely have faith, yeah. Trust in God all the way. Yeah, Sherry?
There have been many times where my very, very young children have asked me that very difficult question of what if that I can't answer. And I remember teaching them to change that what if, that's the wrong question. And we look at Daniel 3,
Yeah.
and we see where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are about to be
Right.
thrown into the fiery furnace, and they say, listen, Nebuchadnezzar, God can save us from this horrible thing that you're about to do to us.
Yeah.
And they say, but even if He doesn't, God is good all the time. And I said,
Right.
if you're asking what if, that's the wrong question. You change it to
Yeah.
even if. Even
Even
if,
if,
no matter
yeah.
what you're scared of, God
Right.
is faithful,
And that is the key. That even if these things happen, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said as they were facing the fiery furnace, they said, even if we do get thrown in the fire and God doesn't save us from this, we're still going to serve God, be faithful to God. We're not serving any other gods. We're not going to bow down to this image. You okay? Okay. All right. So yeah, Chad.
I was watching a fight last night, okay? And this
Shut
guy,
beating you up.
and this guy, he won the belt. He won the championship belt, and he's 36 years old. And they say there's this curse: nobody over 35 can win a belt. It just has never happened in the lower weight classes. And he said something that stuck with me, and he said, listen, adversity is a privilege.
Okay.
And he had lost his last 3 fights in a row, and the last 2 he got knocked out both times. And they gave him a shot at the belt again, and he beat this young kid, and he won the belt back. And when they interviewed him, he said, adversity is a privilege.
Sure.
And the guy interviewing him said, what? And he goes, listen, no matter what happens, you will come back better and stronger.
Yeah.
You know, from the adversity that you've had. So in the Bible, you look at that verse, that talks about iron sharpening iron,
Oh, yeah.
and you sit there and apply it to your life and say, listen, if you have faith and you stick with it and the only thing that could make it not applicable is if you die. But anyway, other than that,
Sure.
you can
Yeah.
come back better, stronger, smarter over the
Right.
situations that you've been put in, and use that knowledge and experience to make yourself a better person.
Oh, yeah. Right, and that's the key.
And so he said, listen, people, will look back, and the younger generation will look back and say, look at what he accomplished after he was down and out and nobody believed in me.
Right.
And he said, and I turned around and proved everybody wrong. That's the stuff that books are written about. That's the stuff that movies are made about.
Right. And that's the key, is what we can learn, and we're to learn and grow stronger, grow better from the things that happen, which is, again, James said, count it all joy. We fall into various trials. That doesn't mean it's going to be fun and pleasant. He doesn't literally mean that I'm going to enjoy suffering and pain and all that.
But I think a lot of times people will get stuck on, for me,
Oh, yeah, that
look
can
at all the
happen.
bad stuff that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, look what God got me through.
Sure.
Look at
And
how
that's
he
the
pulled
key.
me through
Yeah.
this, and look
Right.
at how much I've learned. But instead, some people just get stuck
Oh, yeah.
in the depression part of it.
Right? We can either complain, get depressed, woe is me, or we can trust in God, put our faith and hope and trust in Him. And we're still going to deal with those emotions and those thoughts. But again, it's how we handle them. It's about taking them to God. The psalmist dealt with that a whole lot. But when everything was said and done, they put their faith and trust in God, no matter how bad things were. Kelly, did you have something?
Yeah, there's a lot we don't know, but we have a promise that all things turn out to the benefit of those who love the Lord.
True.
And if you look at Stephen,
Yeah.
we're not having some earthly discussion about how he went through all this and look how it turned out for him, because he died.
Oh, yeah.
But it still turned out to his
Right.
benefit. And then if you look at Job, who's the only person we have God's testimony, there's none like him on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
At the end of all of that, Job was a better man
Sure.
because he had to confront some demons that he had.
Yeah.
And from a spiritual perspective, even though he lost a lot, went through a lot,
Right.
he grew spiritually,
Yeah.
which he needed to do. So
Yeah.
that's the bottom line. From a kingdom perspective,
Right.
no matter what we go through in this life,
Yeah.
kingdom-wise, we're going to benefit.
Right. We have hope, even if everything goes bad in this life. That's okay. Because we have hope beyond this life. We have hope of heaven. This world is not our home. Chuck, you have something?
Kind of what Jared was saying, the same fire that hardens clay will melt wax.
Yeah.
And we get to decide whether or not we're the clay or we're the wax.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Right.
could this kill me or could this make me better,
Sure.
stronger, more useful?
It can make us, said I think a previous lesson said, it can either make us bitter or it can make us better. And it's our choice, right? Gary? Then we're going to move on.
Real quick, if you take a rose, flower, and you smell it, smells wonderful, but if you crush it,
Yeah, well, there you go.
that's all.
Yeah. And hopefully that's what happens in our life. We do have a couple examples, and there's plenty of examples we could talk about. But the two he gives in the book, Job, we've really already talked a lot about. Job went through, at the beginning, everything, Job did really well. At the beginning, Job, he lost everything. He was suffering physically, mentally, emotionally. But he remained in there. He hung in there, remained faithful. Sadly, though, then it turned into bitterness and demanding answers from God, some self-righteousness, and he wasn't helped by his friends at all, who were accusing him of, oh, this is happening because you obviously have sinned. But he basically, Job, went through that, demanded answers from God. God came at the end, and God gave Job all the answers he wanted. No. Did God answer Job's questions? No, he didn't. God basically said, you need to remember who I am and who you are. End of story. And Job did. Job humbled himself. Job repented. Job, got his thinking and his heart back right. And then we know God ended up blessing him even more than he had been before. Even Joseph, we know Joseph, his story and how things turned out. Things were bad. By the providence of God, it was turned into good. But Joseph had to suffer a lot from his brothers, from slavery, falsely accused, thrown in prison. It ultimately ended up, God used that to get Joseph where God wanted him to be, and Joseph was able to become second in command in Egypt and to save his family from starvation and all of that. And those are good stories, and that's great. And there is a lot to learn about faith and about God and about all of those things. The problem is, reminds me of the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 11, the hall of faith, right? Talk about a lot of these examples of faith, and even Abraham and Moses and Noah and Enoch and all of these. And even he goes on to say, we could tell of David and all this and all these victories and great things that happened because of their faith. And sometimes, if we're not careful, we can look at these examples, and such as Job and Joseph and others, and how in the end, it actually physically worked out really well for them. God blessed them very rich. And if we're not careful, we can then expect or demand that to happen for us. That, well, if I just have faith in God and love Him and trust Him, that everything's going to work out in this life. And that's not always true. The Hebrews writer went on, if you keep reading, he says, we go on to talk about those who were persecuted, those who were tortured, those who were sawn in two, those who were killed, those who were destitute, who had faith in God. But this physical life, physically speaking, it didn't work out for them in this life. And that's okay. What about Lazarus, the beggar? Did it work out for him in this life? Nope. But it worked out in eternity. It worked out for all of these examples of faith in eternity. And so that is the key. Now, God can bless us physically if He so chooses. But even if God chooses not to bless us with riches and health and all this stuff, so many people in this world are pushing the health and wealth gospel. That, well, if you're, just faithful to God, trust in Him, then He's going to give you a bunch of money and keep you healthy and strong. And that's just not true. Can God do that? And does God do that at times? Sure. But that's not a promise and guarantee for everybody. And that's why, again, what are we putting our focus on? Are we focused on this life, or are we focused on the life to come? The life that's coming. And where are our priorities? That will have a lot to do with our perspective. Even Jesus said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, but treasures in heaven. That's where our hope is. That's where our goal is. And that's how it's all going to work out for good for those who, we've talked about that in a previous lesson, I think. Now, when Paul said all things work out good for those who love God, he didn't mean, you're going to have money and health. We meant, number one, we're going to learn and grow from the adversity we have. But then ultimately, even if this life never works out, it's going to work out in eternity, because I have a home in heaven with God. Jimmy?
We need to remember that the sun shines on the just and the unjust.
Yep.
And the rain falls on the just and the unjust.
That's right.
So it doesn't
Yep.
matter one way or the other.
Yeah, even Jesus said, the sun shines on the just and the unjust, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. That's actually in this last section. Two truths about all of this. The first one being what on page 39? Stuff we actually kind of already talked about this. Suffering comes from what? Freedom of choice, right? We already touched on that earlier. God has given us freedom of choice. So sometimes things happen because of our own choices, right? Sometimes things happen because God has given mankind free choice, and many of mankind choose evil, and they do evil things. And so, freedom of choice, he talks about. That God has made us a free moral agent. In other words, we can make good choices or bad ones, but so can everybody else. Some people make choices that affect themselves and others in tragic ways, and that's sad. But the question he says there, because some make bad choices, do we really want God to take away the right given to everyone, including ourselves? That, do we really want God to just make everybody do stuff? And the answer to that would be no. But then secondly, what's the second truth on page 39, which was kind of touched on by Miss Gemma?
No respecter of persons.
Yeah. Tragedy, suffering is no respecter of persons, whether you're a good person, a bad person, even as Jesus himself said. As Gemma reminded us, that the sun and the rain comes upon the good and the bad. And God is no respecter of persons when it comes to that. And we cannot demand him to be either. That is not our place. But time and chance happen to all. I like this last section under that. We say, well, why me? Well, actually, it was Shelley. She's not in here now. She's teaching a class. I think it was in a previous lesson she brought this up, this very point. That it's, where's it at? Instead of saying, why me, say, why not me? What is that? What do you mean by that? Why not me?
Try me.
What's that?
Try me. Put me through trials.
Yeah. The trials, the testing. I'm going to grow from that, for one.
When the apostles were taken before the Jewish council, they were ultimately beaten and
Yeah.
Here's the key. They left rejoicing to suffer for his name.
Right?
I think what Brother Chad said earlier was very respectful.
Yeah.
In that suffering is a blessing.
Sure.
It strengthens the faith, gives you hope for the
Yeah.
future. And after all, that's what Jesus did. He
Yeah.
suffered,
Oh, yeah.
though he didn't need, because he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And there are reasons we don't know.
Jesus suffered a lot. But yeah, it's, why not me? Because who better to deal with these things than people of faith? Right? I mean, do we really want people who don't have faith, who don't have hope, who don't know God to go through these kinds of things? I mean, I can't imagine. Can't imagine going through this life and going through tragedies without God. But how much better to have to deal with these things, to be a person of faith, of hope, of trust, of love in God. So really that perspective of why not me. And then even as Job said something also very pertinent, very important. Job in chapter 2, verse 10 said, shall we indeed accept good from God, but not accept adversity? We can't have, it's going to be both. We can't expect only good to happen because we've already talked about the reasons things are going to happen. Again, the world in which we live, and really something we should get from these trials and tragedies and suffering is more faith and hope for what's coming in heaven. We go to Paul, the example. Paul said multiple times, the glory that's coming is far greater than anything we can suffer in this life. The things we suffer in this life cannot compare to the joy and the glory and the life that's coming. That's what we've got to look forward to. So really, one thing that tragedies and sufferings and trials and challenges should do is it should make us more homesick for heaven, if anything. It should make us more, as Paul said, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. It is better to go and to be with the Lord. He was looking forward to going and being with the Lord. And that's got to be our hope. That's got to be what we're looking forward to. And things that happen in this life should be pushing us even closer to God, even further to longing for heaven. Instead of sitting, complaining, and woe is me, and why is God letting this happen? Say, well, man, I can't wait to get to heaven. I can't wait to, put down my cross, put these things behind me, and look forward to being with God in heaven. Devin?
I know that it's a good question to ask, but whenever we're suffering or hurting, to ask, where is God, why God, how come me? Another question, when we're out in the mission field, as to where are we, or where am I, keeping God in my life?
That's true. Share, was that it?
I understand it's important. On Sundays and Wednesdays, it's easy for us to feel encouraged, feel spiritually strong, and ready to face anything because God is with us. But the question is whether or not we're keeping God with us every day of our lives, even out in the mission, because out in the mission field with Facebook trials and distractions and things that are trying to keep us so focused on that we're not focused on our sole purpose, which is to live for God.
Yeah. So what's Devin's saying is, and we've kind of touched on that second part of it's easy to talk about faith and trust in God right here in the classroom, right? To tell you, I got faith and strength and courage, trust in God. But it's when we leave this building, when we face the challenges of life, that we're going to be tested. And so Devin's point was, instead of saying, where is God when we're going through these things, we should ask, where am I putting God in my life? If God is far from me, well, whose fault is that? Our own. But if I've got God close to me every day, then I know He's right there. He's always going to be there if we want Him, and if we rely on Him, and if we trust in Him. And that is, of course, the key to all of this, is putting our faith and our hope and our trust in God daily, not just on Sunday and Wednesday when we come here. This is the easy part. This is easy. I mean, I could stand up here all day and talk about this, right? And I could.
No.
Yeah. But it's how we apply it in our daily life with the daily trials, big and small. When tragedy does come, if it comes, how are we going to handle it? And that's why I said we need to be preparing for those things when? Right now, before it happens. Growing in our faith in God, growing as close as we can to God now, before those things happen. So that when those things happen, God's already with me. And He's going to be with me through these things. And so that's important as well. Well, we're out of time this morning. Final thoughts, questions of anything we've talked about today? Okay? Well, there are some discussion questions. I do encourage you to look at those. We didn't get to those, today. Question one's a good one. What are you going to answer when a friend, who knows you're a believer asks why of senseless tragedies, or they ask, where is God when I hurt? That's something to think about. Let's see. Yeah, look at some other good questions in there. And trusting in God and all of that, and overcoming evil with good. We'll come ready next week with lesson 7, and we'll talk some more about trusting in God. If you still need a book, make sure to get one there in the foyer. All right, thank you.